Welcome to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is your guide to start creating a lifestyle by design. From entrepreneurship, money and finance, tax optimization and residencies, and everything in between, this show highlights the nuances of a true global citizen lifestyle. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the show. And in today's episode, I sit down with Tommy from Travel Tirement. This is a very interesting conversation. We really get into the details of Europe specific. We're talking mostly Italy and France in this episode. And we're talking about the various different home purchasing options that there are in these countries and just how much more affordable they are, especially if you're coming from a country like Canada or the US. Also, some of the interesting schemes that some of these countries offer in order to bring foreign investment into the country, along with some interesting potential tax options that you can take advantage of if you relocate to these countries. So, without further ado, let's dive into the episode.
Like a lot of people, I got the travel bug when I was very young. My parents took me traveling and encouraged me to travel a lot. And we did a lot of traveling when I was very young. And then, of course, family life happens. You kind of you don't travel quite as much. You lose that bug a little bit. And then about 10 years ago, my father passed away from cancer. And then within 5 years, my mother passed away. And obviously, it was very sad, but they were world travelers. They traveled every year. They went to some amazing places, and what I realized is, I'm 53, my father passed at 70, is I got this, you know, sudden feeling of the clock is ticking, and there's so many places I want to see and experience and share with my family, my wife, and it kind of lit a fire under me to not only travel more myself, but also encourage other people to travel. So basically, I researched, I love Europe, as a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, do. And so I started researching Europe for travel destinations. My wife and I are now empty nesters. We just took our third child to college. And so we were like, we really want to travel more. We don't want to put this off. We don't want to wait till, retirement. And I started researching places in Europe, particularly Italy and France. And what I discovered just was amazing. The affordability, the low cost of real estate, like if you wanted to buy a second home there, maybe make it a future retirement home. Um, there are some kind of unique tax benefits to retiring to Italy or France that we can get into. Anyway, I was just shocked at what I found, and I started sharing these things with my friends online, through Twitter. I started a YouTube channel where I would share these things, and apparently, some other people have the same feelings as I do because it seems to have gotten pretty popular. And like I said, I just love sharing the uh, the things I find online.
So let's dive in to Europe. Now, you're from the US originally. I know you're there now, but you do spend a lot of time and have quite a few investments in Europe. So what did starting that journey look like for you? And I'm curious on the time frame as well. And what investments have you gone through with in Europe?
Well, we are still, like I said, we just took our third child to college. I mean, literally this year, and so we have not closed on anything in Europe as of yet. But I have this long list of potential places that I would love to invest in, to have either, like I said, as a vacation home, a place to share with the family, or as a rental while we're not there, and then have a place to visit. Um, the time frame. Well, I'll answer this first because this is what people ask me a ton. I get a ton of questions about for Italy and France because those are the two countries I really kind of focus on. As an American or U.S. citizen, there are zero restrictions for buying property in either Italy or France. You don't have to have citizenship. You don't even have to have a visa. Um, Obviously, it depends on how long you want to stay in that property if you bought it. But a lot of people think they have to have citizenship or there's some special requirement. You can literally today go online, browse properties overseas. If you found something you liked, you could hire somebody to be your proxy to basically sign for you over there, and you could just purchase a property. There are zero restrictions. So that's a common question I get is like, what's the process you have to go through? It's very similar to buying property in the United States. Obviously, I would recommend you go actually see it. You know, go look at it. You could hire your own like inspector to check it out. It's not legally required, but I would recommend it. But it's very similar to the United States when you're if you were going to buy a house, you would make an offer. Again, you could make it lower than the offering price. You can negotiate once the price is settled on. There's basically a contract that you would sign that would take it off the market for other people so that you could do some due diligence, you know, make sure it's the person selling it can legally sell it, all that kind of stuff. And then the whole process you would go through, um, 90 days, I would say. I would plan on 90 days at a minimum. Um, I know in the United States, there are some real estate deals that can be done in, 20 days, 30 days. Europe, because of the bureaucracy, I would definitely plan on at least 90 days, maybe more again if you're gonna wanna go see it multiple times, but, 90 days is a pretty good time frame. So, um, that's for both Italy and France. Again, no restrictions. The only thing that would potentially cause you to take maybe a little more time is if you are gonna plan on living there full time, you would have to apply for a visa, a long stay visa, and that process can take a little bit longer, particularly for Italy because they are just they're swamped for visa applications. France, I've heard, I haven't applied for a visa there, but France, I've heard is much quicker. They outsource the visa application process. So my understanding is that can be done very quickly as long as you meet all the requirements. There's income requirements and documentation you have to provide, but it's actually much. I mean, more the more I researched it, it's actually much simpler than I first imagined it was. It all depends on again how long you want to stay there. Do you need a visa? Can you just go on a passport? If you already have a passport and you're only going to spend a certain amount of time in Europe, then it's super easy to go through the process.
Going through your YouTube, I see some very interesting videos, and one of them is titled Cheap Houses in France, Wine Castles, Rivers. Talk to me a little bit about what these properties that you're seeing, both in France and Italy, are like and how they compare to real estate that you see in the US. Really, what you can get for your money.
Yeah, that's a great question because that is to me like the beauty of these countries. Now, when I say France and Italy, I'm not talking about Paris or Rome or Milan. Those, the big cities, the kind of center of culture, and those places are still going to be very expensive. But both countries are, I mean, Italy and France are both large countries. They're bigger than people think. France is actually the largest country in Western Europe. And when you get out away from Paris, or in the case of Italy, when you get away from Milan or Rome, you have this just enormous, beautiful countryside filled with towns and cities, um, historic medieval hilltop towns, gorgeous coastal properties in these coastal towns. And if you're just thinking about Paris or Rome or Milan, you really need to get outside of that box. The other benefit is because of these places are not in the big cities, they're super affordable. The cost of living in the south of France, say southwestern France, can be um, 50% of what it is in the United States. In Italy, it could be even less. Some of these properties, like in the southern part of Italy, You can find a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, like village property. So like you're in a village, you can walk to bakeries, you can walk to shops. Um, you can find places for 60,000, 80,000, 120,000. You would have like a super nice, fully renovated place. Um, France is a little more expensive, but not by much. Again, in the southern parts of France, you could find a house. I know there was one on the YouTube channel where I profiled this house. It's literally on a river, like the river is right in front of it. It's also in a small town. There's a restaurant right across the street. It's along a bike greenway path. Both countries have tons of infrastructure, greenways, walkways, hiking trails. If you're an outdoor lover, both countries are amazing. But this house in France, I think it was like $150,000, fully renovated. I think it's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. So we're talking about significantly less than the United States. It all depends on, again, what you're looking for. Um, there are drawbacks to living in France and Italy, which we can talk about more, but the cost of living and the cost of real estate is just shockingly low.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you sharing the numbers because I think that gives a really good visual. And I think it is, I mean, I'm used to these numbers being in Latin America and having been outside of Canada for me for quite some time. But I think, and I'm curious if you have experienced this, the positive sticker shock that a lot of Westerners, let's talk specifically Canada and the US, have when they're envisioning these beautiful homes in the countryside in Europe and expecting it to be $1 million, which yes, it very well can be in certain cases, but just for your standard home where it could be 3 times, 4 times more in Canada and the US, and that's just what we're used to. Is that something that you experience often? Are you looking to become a diversified global citizen? If this is a lifestyle that you're seeking to create, we can help. Whether it be multiple residencies, citizenships, bank accounts, trusts, or company formations, we operate in 30 plus of the most tax friendly jurisdictions around the globe to get you structured properly. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more and to get your global citizen journey underway today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of my audience are, people in their 50s and 60s. So they may have a home they own in the United States. I'm not going to say it's paid off, but maybe they don't have much left on the mortgage. But a lot of these properties they own in the United States, are maybe now 450, 550, $600,000. And I'm talking about like you know, in a kind of a regular neighborhood in, I don't want to say rural America, but like here in North Carolina, we are in a very small town, and I think the last valuation I saw, like on our house, was maybe $600,000. So someone in that scenario, you could sell your house, pay off the mortgage, buy a place in Italy and France, and still have some money left over if you wanted to. It's that affordable, and I think for a lot of people, number one, I think a lot of people are skeptical of that until they actually start digging into it, which is, I understand it, but it's legitimate. I mean, these are real prices. And then the other thing, like I said, is there are roadblocks to doing this. Language. You're going to have to assimilate into another culture. Um, it, Again, it's going to be different, but for people who dream of doing this, they dream of experiencing another country, another culture. I mean, the culture, it's very relaxed culture, beautiful geography. You can be in the north of Italy. They have the Alps and hilltop towns and vineyards everywhere. The south is very Mediterranean. You can have these beautiful whitewashed uh, towns that are right on the coast, crystal clear water. France, same thing. You can in the west of France, you have um, warmer Atlantic vineyards, rolling hills, lazy rivers. In the east of France, you have the Alps, you have snow skiing. I mean, both of them are just gorgeous countries, and you can find these kind of deals all over the country. Like I said, as long as you're not like in the center of Paris, you're in the center of Rome, center of Milan, or even Lyon in France. That'll be pretty expensive. The opportunities are amazing.
Wow, you're selling the dream, Tommy. You really are. Okay, so talk to me about. You mentioned there briefly some of the potential negatives. I mean, I think for this audience listening and mine and your audience together, it wouldn't be so much of a drawback to be immersed in a new culture and new language, but to some it may be. I'm curious, what are some other negatives or drawbacks that you have seen throughout this process, because it's very easy to see the positives. You're living in Europe, very glamorized, but that's only one side of the story.
Yep. Well, and yeah, exactly. People need to understand when we're talking about, again, retiring or living there like for half the year. Again, it's not going to be vacation. There's a big difference between vacation and full time living. So you have to understand that there are going to be some cultural differences, just like in daily stuff, shopping for groceries, what insurance you might need for your house, how the healthcare system works. And again, both countries have very cheap, if not free, healthcare, and it's world class healthcare. But you're going to have to navigate that system. On the language thing, and I know you're, mostly in South America or Central America, Spanish. Like, if you're thinking about moving to France, start learning French today. Like, language is something you can immediately start getting a handle on. And again, you don't need to be like 100% fluent when you get there, but you certainly need to know some basics. Just making an effort goes a long way to, again, having people open up to you. People in Italy and France just want to know like you're trying. But language is a huge thing. And like I said, there's zero things stopping you from starting that today. There's, tons of free YouTube channels. There's paid courses. There's, you know, anyway, I strongly encourage people to start the language learning process as soon as possible. Um, Another drawback, and I mean, to me, it's technically not a drawback, but psychologically, it's a drawback, is when people move from, say, the United States to Italy. Um, the taxes in Italy, the tax rates are much higher than in the United States. So both countries have, progressive taxes, which means like the first amount of money, there's a certain rate. Then the next amount of money, there's another rate. Then there's another rate above that. In the United States, like the first rate is like 10%. In Italy, the first rate is 23%. And so a lot of people will be like, well, why would I go to Italy and pay 23% when I can stay in the United States and pay 10% on that first amount of money? And the thing they don't think about is the cost of living. If I if it costs me, say, 70 to $100,000 to live a decent life in the United States, but it only costs me 25 to 35,000 in Italy, then the tax rate, it doesn't matter. You're still going to have more left over, even paying the higher rate. You're going to have more disposable money in Italy than you would compared to the United States. And it's the same thing in France. France has much higher marginal rates. But again, it's not apples to apples. If you're spending $100,000 to live in Italy, you're going to be in a freaking palace. You're gonna be living an incredible lifestyle, which again, that's fine if you want to, but don't complain to me that the tax rate is higher when your lifestyle is so much better in these countries. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just have a lot of people where they say, well, this house is super cheap and it sounds, this looks like a beautiful area, but what's the taxes? And I say, oh, it's, starts at 23%, then it goes to 35%. People lose their minds. And I'm like, you just got to factor it in. Like you got to, you know, do, create a little financial plan that factors this in and actually do the numbers, because I can almost guarantee you the actual tax you're going to be paying is less in these countries. And the lifestyle is a good chance the lifestyle is going to be much, much better.
Yeah, and I appreciate you putting that into perspective because I think a lot of people they see one factor and that may be a tax rate and lose their minds like you said, but there's so many other factors that need to be brought into that equation that aren't necessarily always initially thought of. So let's talk on the topic of taxation. There are some interesting tax breaks within both Italy and France. We work within Italy for a few of those, but I'm curious, diving into some details on what some of these more lucrative tax rate options could be for somebody who is interested in this conversation and interested in learning more about what relocating to Europe may look like.
Yep, absolutely. So I know I just mentioned that the starting tax rate in Italy was 23%, but they have a special program in Italy, in the southern part of Italy, where it's a 7% flat tax program. There are 8 regions, basically starting, if you look at a map of Italy, Rome is about midway down. So starting about where Rome is and down, not including the region where Rome is, but close to there, all of those regions to the south of there, they have, like I said, this special program. They created it in, I think, 2019. If you move into Italy and have a foreign pension, foreign retirement account. So again, if an American moved in, they have Social Security or an IRA or a 401k, and you relocate to a town that has 20,000 people or less in any of these 8 regions, then you qualify to pay it's literally just 7% on your income for 10 years. So again, think about 23% versus 7%. That could potentially be tens of thousands of dollars every year for that 10 years. And again, we're not, you're not going to be living in the center of Rome. You're not going to be living in Milan. These are smaller towns, but again, think about a town with 10 or 15,000 people. You're going to have tons of restaurants. You're going to have tons of shops, bus services, maybe train services. You can find places that qualify for this that are not, again, a tiny little enclave on the top of a distant mountain. Some of these places can be very, very nice. So that's a huge tax deal in Italy. In France, our tax treaty, the U.S. tax treaty, and maybe with Canada also, but I know the U.S. tax treaty with France is interesting because France does not tax United States retirement accounts, including Social Security. You have to report it in France, but you only pay in the United States. And I'll come back to that point, paying in the United States. But so say you retire or you're thinking about retirement and you have again a 401k, an IRA, a Roth IRA, Social Security, all of those incomes you have to report them in France, but you only pay in the United States, which has much favorable tax treatment. Now, the things that you would have to pay on in France would be rental income. If you're still working, obviously, like W-2, like employment income, um, interest income, those kind of things. But if you have retirement accounts, that can be huge tax savings because you're basically living in France, but you're paying the US rates on those accounts.
Interesting. I'm curious too, speaking about this topic, your thoughts on the dollar home scheme. I don't know if that's still going on or not, but what your thoughts are on that scheme in Italy.
Yep. Yeah, the dollar, €1 homes is still a thing. It's not quite as, I think a lot of them have just literally been bought up, so it's not quite as widespread as it was a few years ago because it was all the rage. Yeah, Southern Italy has not just southern Italy, but mostly southern Italy, particularly Sicily, had this scheme where basically just abandoned houses. They wanted people to come in and renovate them and move in. So they were offering them for €1. Just a couple of things for people to know. None of them sold for €1. €1 was the starting price, and usually there was an auction. So they might be, a few hundred euros, a few thousand euros, when all was said and done. You also had to pay like real estate transaction fees on that purchase, so that was more than €1. But I will say, I think the average price or average money spent on €1 home, somebody did a study. They went out and talked to people that had done these, was something like, 30,000, 20 to $30,000. So they were buying these €1 homes, not for €1, but maybe a few thousand. But there was a requirement that you have to renovate these homes within a certain amount of time. So it's not like you just go in an office and say, "Hey, I want this thing for €1. Here's €1," and then you're just done. There were requirements again that you had to renovate it, you had to do it in a certain amount of time, and if you didn't, you had to forfeit it back to to the local municipality. I'll just say, I mean, and some people got great deals with these. I've seen some absolutely stunning €1 homes. Well, they started as €1 homes, and they ended up being completely renovated and look beautiful. Um, but the majority of these, when you go to like initially when they're offered for €1, they're absolute wrecks. They're absolutely like they're not livable. You would have to completely redo the entire thing. So for somebody who's looking for a serious project, these can be great deals. But like I said earlier, there are, livable places that you can buy. And I mean, sure, you could still have a renovation budget to make it nicer, make it yours. But you could still find places for 20,000, 40,000, 60,000 that again, you could immediately move into, live there and renovate it over time. So it really depends on what you're interested in. But the €1 homes, again, it's not a scam. People think this is a scam. It's like it's not a scam, but it's also not €1. You're gonna pay more than that. It's just you're gonna get a super deal, but it's on a 100% fixer upper. You're gonna have to do a lot of work, spend a good amount of money to get it in good shape.
Yeah, I remember when that came out. I think that was around 2020, right? When that initially rolled out, and it was just everywhere, Euro homes, but it was very misleading with the marketing. Like, I guess great marketing, right? Lots of Americans moved over, but not quite what they thought they were getting. 30, 50K in not €1. I'm curious, in these regions, Italy, France, more rural regions, are there any laws, restrictions, regulations around short or long term rentals?
Um, I wish I knew more about the recent changes. I know Italy had talked about making some changes to the laws for short-term rentals. Basically, the way short-term rentals worked in Italy. I don't know if it's changed, but as long as you rented a place for less than 30 days, you did not have to register as like a business. So you wouldn't have to register to your local, municipality or whatever. Um, there were rumors that they were going to change that to make it so that all those people would have to register just like a hotel has to, and long-term rental places have to. I don't know if that's still the case, that you don't, but that was a huge benefit because again, people could come in, buy a place. Maybe you're going to live there, half the year, and the other half of the year you're going to rent it out. And as long as you, again, put it on Airbnb or VRBO and rent it for less than 30 days, it was basically, you know, there was very little admin. There's very little overhead or admin you had to do with it. Now you do have to, if that in those cases, even if you're not a citizen or a full-time resident of Italy or France, if you're renting your house there, any money that's made in the country, you do have to like file taxes and pay in the country. That money, um, definitely you have to pay like the progressive, full tax rates on. But short-term rentals, again, it's still super popular. But like I said, Italy, there were some rumors about making some changes because they were afraid of, you know, people snatching up all these cheap houses and then kind of making the housing issues worse. But I don't think they've made any actual law changes yet.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something that I'm always keeping my pulse on, especially here in Latin America. But just curious what that looked like for Europe. Well, thank you for sharing so much information. Before leaving and ending off the show, is there anything else that's important to touch on within this that you feel like we have not yet?
The only thing I would say, just because it's easy, I know this happened to me when I started researching these things. It's very easy now with the internet to go online and you can look at some of these super cheap properties. And of course, um, the real estate agents are going to make them look spectacular and the way they write about them. I will just say this: the area you relocate to or the area where you're buying the property is way more important than the property itself. So, and by that I mean a like super fancy, beautiful, stone property, let's say like in Italy. If it's not in a good location, meaning amenities aren't close, it's hard to get to, maybe the weather is not terrific year round, that place is not going to work long term. But a kind of decent place, maybe a fixer upper even in a great location can turn into a dream home because again, you can renovate it, you make some changes. And I see a lot of people who will contact me and they'll say, "Oh, I found this really amazing house." And when I look at where it's located, I think you're gonna drive yourself crazy. Like maybe it's in a hilltop village, but it's like this windy, super tiny road that you have to get up to. And like every time you leave the house, you have to go back down this super windy, thin road, maybe to get to the restaurant or get to the grocery store or get to the, shopping. Um, so just keep that in mind if people go out and start browsing, for properties. The area is more important than the property itself. If you find a great area, th- then look for an individual property, not the other way around. I just think that will save people a little bit of heartache, and also, you know, people see a beautiful property and think, "Oh, this is going to be the one," and then get disappointed because again, it's not in a great location.
Absolutely. And great firsthand experience advice, I'm sure. Thank you for that. So, where can the listeners find you online?
Probably the best place is my YouTube channel. If you could just go to YouTube and search for at Travel Tirement, and that's Travel Tirement, like travel and retirement pushed together. So the RE is removed. So Travel Tirement. They can also join my newsletter if they go to my website, traveltirement.com. I'm happy to have them join. I have a newsletter for Italy and France. Italy goes out on Saturdays, France goes out on Wednesdays, and it's free to join.
You've just listened to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. If anything from this episode resonated with you, I'd appreciate if you share this podcast on your socials. And of course, be sure to tag us at Work, Wealth, and Travel. And don't forget to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining us on this global citizen journey, and we'll see you in the next episode.